The transmission arrived as a cold whisper in the void, laced with the arrogance of a species that had never known failure. Translated into the blunt efficiency of human language, the message was simple. Surrender your worlds, your weapons, and your future. Resistance will not be tolerated. Aboard the USS Indomitable, General Adrian Cole listened, arms crossed, expression unreadable. The bridge around her hummed with quiet tension, officers locked to their stations, waiting for her response. She let the silence stretch, as if weighing the very gravity of existence itself, then finally turned to the communications officer. Run that through analysis again. Any nuances we missed? None, ma'am. It's a standard ultimatum. Complete subjugation or extinction. Cole exhaled sharply through her nose. The Zorvith Dominion had chosen its moment well. Humanity had pushed beyond its solar cradle, establishing colonies on Mars, Europa, and Titan, but their fleet was still an infant compared to the rumored armadas lurking in the black. Earth was strong, defiant, but it was not ready for this. And the Zorvith knew it. Across the bridge, Admiral Santiago clasped his hands behind his back. His voice, deep and deliberate, broke the hush. They don't fear us. They think we're just another primitive race to fold under pressure. Cole nodded, her eyes narrowing. They fear our weapons. They wouldn't be here if they didn't think we were at least worth the effort. But they don't fear us. Not yet. A new voice joined the discussion. Dr. Elias Vance, lead xenostrategist for the United Terran Defense Force. He adjusted his glasses, his face pale in the dim bridge lighting. Historically, the Zorvith do not negotiate. They don't simply conquer, they erase resistance. They won't accept treaties, and they won't stop until we are either enslaved or extinct. And we can't let either happen. Cole's words landed with a quiet finality. A soft chime cut through the weight of the conversation. Incoming feed, the comms officer announced. The main display flickered to life, and for the first time, humanity looked upon its executioner. The Zorvith commander loomed over a throne of fused metal and living tissue. His skin was the color of obsidian, ridged and layered like armor, with deep-set eyes burning with predatory amusement. His voice, though artificially translated, carried a natural resonance that slithered through the bones. You have been given your choice. Kneel, and you may serve. Resist, and you will be nothing more than echoes in the void. Cole stepped forward. This is General Adrian Cole of the United Terran Defense Force. You entered our space uninvited, issued threats against our people, and expect submission in return. She tilted her head slightly, a smirk tugging at the corner of her mouth. That's cute. A flicker of movement, perhaps the Zorvith equivalent of amusement. You misunderstand, human. This is not a discussion. This is your final warning. You have one planetary cycle to surrender. The screen went dark. For a moment, there was nothing but the rhythmic pulse of the ship's engines, the steady inhale-exhale of a crew staring into the abyss of their own mortality. Santiago broke the silence first. They think we'll roll over. Cole cracked her knuckles. Then it's time to show them who we are. The order went out across the fleet. Every available warship was mobilized, every reserve soldier activated. Factories on Mars and Luna ramped up production, railgun rounds, kinetic bombardment payloads, stealth drones. Humanity did not possess energy shields or gravity warping technology, but they had something better. They had ingenuity. They had resilience. They had the unshakable will to fight. News of the Zorvith ultimatum spread like wildfire. On Earth, 100 different nations stood as one, pooling resources, setting aside conflicts that had once seemed insurmountable. On the colonies, civilians volunteered en masse, ready to defend the only home they had ever known. Humanity was not just preparing for war. It was preparing to prove itself. But war did not wait. The first strike came at the edge of the system Tycho 9, a mining outpost orbiting Saturn. The warning was brief, the defense insufficient. The Zorvith descended in fire, their ships cutting through the station's meager defenses like blades through cloth. The distress call lasted only 90 seconds. By the time the Indomitable and its fleet arrived, the station was gone. Cole stared at the wreckage, jaw tight, fists clenched. The silence of the void mocked her. A new transmission pinged the fleet's channel. Zorvath this time, but different, unedited, raw, the guttural sounds of their language unfiltered by translation software. The meaning, however, was clear. The corpses of Tycho IX's defenders had been strung along the wreckage, left to drift as a message. Vance swallowed hard. They want us to be afraid. Cole turned away from the display, steel in her voice. They want a reaction. Let's give them one. Her orders were swift. No retreat. No negotiations. No more waiting. Humanity would not kneel. The war had begun. The first battle of the war erupted on the outskirts of the Sol system, where the icy reach of Jupiter's moons concealed humanity's last hope for an ambush. The Indomitable and its fleet of warships lay in wait, engines running cold, hulls massed against the void with thermal dampeners and radiation scramblers. It was a gamble. Humans did not have the Zorvath's shields, nor their sheer size, but they had learned to fight in the dark. General Adrian Cole stood at the heart of the bridge, watching as the enemy fleet glided into range. The Zorvath did not hide. Their warships moved with the confidence of a species that had never faced real resistance, bright and defiant against the black, arrogant in their assumption of victory. The Dominion had learned to fear humanity's weapons, but they still did not fear humans. Cole intended to change that. A silent countdown blinked on the tactical display. The fleet was spread across the ice fields between Callisto and Ganymede, every ship locked in formation, waiting for the order. They had only one shot at this. If the Zorvath realized the trap too soon, they would regroup, and humanity's resistance would be over before it began. Her comms officer raised a hand. Enemy fleet has entered the kill zone. Admiral Santiago, standing beside her, gave a slow exhale. They don't see us. Cole let the silence stretch. The Zorvath's ships loomed closer, their reinforced hulls reflecting the pale light of Jupiter. The Dominion's war doctrine had been clear: bombard, overwhelm, and eradicate. They had likely expected to find the remnants of Earth's forces scrambling for survival. Instead, they had sailed straight into a killing field. She didn't give a speech. She didn't need to. Every soldier in the fleet knew what was at stake. Fire. The void erupted. Kinetic rounds, invisible to the naked eye, lanced through the darkness, tearing into the Zorvath fleet. Railguns roared in relentless sequence, launching tungsten slugs at near-relativistic speeds. The first volley struck hard, armor crumpled, unshielded hulls fractured, and for the first time, the Zorvath hesitated. Then the second wave hit. The Indomitable's Dreadnought-class cannons spat nuclear-tipped projectiles, detonating between enemy formations, sending shockwaves rippling through their ranks. Human warships maneuvered aggressively, darting through the chaos with pinpoint precision. The void was no longer silent. It was a symphony of destruction. And yet, the Zorvath did not flee. Their retaliation was swift. Plasma lances carved through the black, shearing human vessels in half, sending flaming wreckage tumbling into Jupiter's gravitational pull. Earth's forces had drawn first blood, but the Zorvath were adaptive, brutal, and utterly unshaken. Their remaining warships adjusted formations with terrifying precision, returning fire with enough raw energy to melt asteroids. The USS Kusanagi took a direct hit to its propulsion core, spinning violently before detonating in a chain reaction that blinded sensors across the fleet. Another vessel, the Arcadia, managed to launch its escape pods before enemy fire gutted its midsection. Every ship lost was a piece of humanity's future burning away, but the Zorvath were bleeding, too. And for the first time in recorded history, they were forced to retreat. Cole stood unmoving as the remaining Zorvath ships broke formation, their commanders finally realizing they had underestimated their prey. The transmission came through moments later, heavily encrypted, relayed from the enemy's flagship. It was the same commander who had once spoken of surrender. "You have bought yourself time, human. Nothing more." The screen cut to static, but Cole could hear something beneath the transmission's final moments. A shift in the Zorvath's tone, an edge of something they had never felt before. Doubt. She turned to Santiago. "Loss report." His expression was grim. 4 ships destroyed, 2 more crippled. Casualty counts still coming in. "We won, Adrian, but we can't do this forever." She already knew that. The Zorvath had been wounded, but they would return, stronger, angrier. And next time, they wouldn't underestimate humanity. "We won today," she said, voice steady. "That's all that matters." But in the quiet of the bridge, she stared at the wreckage drifting between the stars, knowing the war was only just beginning. The Zorvith did not retreat for long. They returned in greater numbers, their ships reinforced with armor designed to withstand railgun fire, their tactics adjusted to counter human ambushes. They had learned. But so had humanity. The war stretched across the system, battles raging over Luna, Mars, and the asteroid colonies. The void between planets became a graveyard of shattered warships and drifting debris. Neither side could claim dominance, and yet humanity endured. General Adrian Cole stood in the war room aboard the Indomitable, surrounded by flickering holodisplays of contested territories. Across from her, Admiral Santiago traced a finger along the front lines, where dozens of red markers, Zorvith war fleets, pressed inward toward Earth. The defensive line was holding, but only just. "We can't keep this up," he said, voice low. "They're adapting faster than we expected." Dr. Elias Vance, standing near the comm station, adjusted his glasses. "That's because they've never fought an enemy that doesn't know when to quit." Cole nodded. She had seen it firsthand. Pilots ramming damaged fighters into enemy battleships, soldiers fighting hand-to-hand aboard burning wrecks, engineers welding their own airlocks shut just to keep a breach from spreading. The Zorvith had advanced technology, but they lacked one thing: desperation. A soft chime interrupted the meeting. "Incoming transmission," the comms officer announced. "It's a direct hail from the enemy flagship." The war room fell silent. Cole exhaled, then signaled for the transmission to be accepted. The main display flickered, and the face of the Zorvith Supreme Commander filled the screen. Unlike the lesser officers they had encountered before, this one radiated a presence more calculating than cruel. His obsidian ridges gleamed under dim warship lighting, and his eyes burned with something deeper than arrogance. "You should not still be standing, human," the commander said, his voice a smooth, deliberate growl. "Your species defies logic." Cole folded her arms. "Funny. We were about to say the same about you." The Zorvith regarded her for a long moment. "This war is inefficient. We have analyzed your capabilities, your limitations. You should have been eradicated within the first cycle of engagement. And yet, you persist." A pause. "Why?" It was not a demand. It was a question. A genuine one. Santiago scoffed. "You came to our system, murdered our people, and now you're confused why we won't roll over?" The commander didn't flinch. "Other species have resisted. None have lasted this long." Cole took a step closer to the display. "Because they weren't human." The Zorvith tilted his head, waiting. "We don't fight because we think we can win," she continued. "We fight because we refuse not to. You threatened everything we've built, everything we are. And we don't break. You don't understand that yet, but you will." For the first time, the Zorvith commander hesitated. Not out of fear, but uncertainty. Then the transmission cut. The war continued, fiercer than before. The Zorvith, despite their calculations, had no choice but to acknowledge an uncomfortable truth: humanity did not submit. It did not surrender. And it did not die quietly. But as another fleet loomed at the edge of the system, larger than any before, Cole knew this war was about to reach its breaking point. The final Zorvith assault began without ceremony, without another demand for surrender. They had learned there was no point. Their fleet darkened the space beyond Mars, a wall of warships so vast it eclipsed the stars. The Dominion had brought everything. No more probing attacks, no more cautious engagements. This was annihilation. Aboard the Indomitable, General Adrian Cole stood before the largest tactical display she had ever seen. The battle had not yet begun, but already she could feel the weight of it pressing against her ribs. Every calculation, every projection told the same story: humanity could not win. Not through force alone. Admiral Santiago leaned in, scanning the fleet composition. "They've stacked their heaviest ships in the center. They'll try to punch through our line, then bombard Earth from orbit." Dr. Elias Vance shook his head. "We can't let them get that far." They won't. Cole's voice was steady. We hit them first. Santiago turned to her. Adrian, we don't have the numbers. No, she agreed. But we have the only thing that matters now. The war had taken its toll, but in that suffering, humanity had become something more, something unstoppable. In their desperation, engineers had worked without sleep, crafting weapons designed not to win battles, but to make victory impossible for the Zorvith. The fleet was damaged, outgunned, but it was filled with soldiers who had nothing left to lose. And that made them the most dangerous force the Zorvith had ever faced. The order went out. The final battle began with fire. Human warships surged forward in reckless defiance, weaving through plasma barrages that seared the void in waves of green and gold. Railguns tore through enemy hulls, missiles detonated inside exposed decks, and kinetic slugs, simple, brutal, and merciless, punched through shields the Zorvith had once believed impenetrable. But still, they advanced. The Indomitable led the charge, diving straight into the heart of the enemy formation. Zorvith dreadnoughts closed in, energy cannons glowing, prepared to finish what their dominion had started. Cole stood firm, watching the final phase unfold. Hidden within the debris fields of Mars, disguised as wreckage, lay the last trick humanity had to offer. Warships rigged as bombs, loaded with every ounce of destructive force Earth could spare. At her command, they ignited. The detonations ruptured across the battlefield, tearing through the heart of the Zorvith fleet. Shock waves sent their warships tumbling, breaking formation, scattering them into chaos. And in that moment, when their fleet hesitated, when their calculations failed them, humanity struck the killing blow. The Indomitable's main cannons fired, driving through the Zorvith command ship's hull. A single, deafening explosion echoed across the void. And then, silence. The Zorvith fleet fractured. Some ships fought on, unwilling to accept defeat. Others turned and fled. It didn't matter. The battle was over. Cole exhaled, the tension finally breaking in her chest. The war had cost them everything. Earth lay scarred, the colonies burned, the fleet reduced to wreckage. But they had won. Humanity had survived. And somewhere, in the cold expanse beyond the wreckage, the Dominion would remember the species that had refused to kneel.